The war continues, a Chicano Liberation Strategy for the new Millennium. Let's read this book. Why not? A typical Chicano day. You wake up and turn on the morning news. You hear about another gang shooting last night. The police arrested a couple of shooters, and the camera shows them led into the police station. You cringe a little as their Hispanic names are read. You had a feeling they were Mexican all along, but you hope they were not. The news cuts away to the opening of a soup kitchen or a homeless shelter, and you try not to look at the lines of brown faces lining up for a free meal. A dark Mexican woman with children speaks to a TV reporter via a translator, but you understand her words. Times are hard now. Usually I have a job, but I got laid off, and my husband doesn't make enough. You eat breakfast and divert your eyes from the TV until a news story about rising incomes in the area is broadcast. Maybe the camera shows a new shopping mall or office building being dedicated by the mayor. The neon lights of a department store or the impressive columns of an office tower catch your eye, and then you see them. A couple of janitors push their mop bucket past the camera. There they are, the Mexicans. Amid the $1 million grand opening, you see your people pushing a broom. If you have a job, you feel embarrassed. Why do they have to show a poor Mexican? If you don't have a job, you feel envious. Shoot, I'd take that job if they gave it to a wetback. If you're a teenager living with your parents, you're probably still asleep. You drive to work, you see truckloads of gardeners tending the yards of the middle class. You flip radio channels and momentarily listen to a Spanish language station. The DJ speaks too fast for you to follow, or you decide you don't like banda music, so you switch to a soul music station. You drive by a school bus stop and see a group of Mexican kids and their mothers waiting for the bus. The kids are shabbily dressed, but they seem happy. The mothers are fat and chattering away. They seem content. Further down the road, you see the fathers of those kids. The men standing on the sidewalk of the intersection and flag down passing cars. It is a familiar sight, but right out of the Great Depression. Day laborers looking for work, flag down employers like hungry prostitutes. A day's work as a janitor? Sure. Gardening? Sure. Hard physical labor? Sure. Long hours and low pay? Sure. You drive by and refuse to make eye contact with these ignorant wetbacks, but you have already seen them, and they have left an impression on you. Why are we always the menial laborers? What are we? The slave race of North America? You ask yourself. You get to work and try not to think about what it means to be Mexican, until a coworker asks you how to pronounce a Spanish word, or asks you about their planned vacation to Acapulco. Have you ever been there? Or how do you pronounce O-A-X-A-C-A? You get defensive and answer curtly, "No, I've never been there. I think it's Oaxaca, but I don't know why." If someone tries to practice Spanish with you, you answer them in English. Maybe they are taking a class and sincerely interested in learning, but you are offended. And you only got a C in high school Spanish, so you better not risk the embarrassment if their Spanish is better than yours. Your foreign coworker comes in. John is from Asia, so you can correct his English if you feel cruel. Sometimes you have to remind him you only speak a little Spanish. "I can understand it, but I was born over here." You pretend it doesn't bother you. John begins the old, "Everyone's an immigrant. Aren't we all lucky to be in this country," etc. You are happy when he leaves. Then there's that Hispanic coworker, Tomas. He's from Central America. He's okay. He's expected you to speak Spanish, but since you're Mexican, he just gives you a disappointed look. The real trouble is from Juan, from Mexico. He speaks Spanish, but tries to get you to speak Spanish. Why doesn't he leave you alone? You always speak English to him and get nervous when he addresses you in Spanish. I can't speak Spanish, you tell yourself. Besides, we're in America. We should speak English. Then someone asks you to translate something from English to Spanish. You either refuse, I don't speak it that well, you say almost proudly, or you tell them to look for Juan or Tomas. Lunch comes and you all go to a Mexican restaurant. The place has tacky plastic decorations and smells of old grease. The waitress is young, but already chubby. She smiles and greets you in Spanish, but you answer in English. She stumbles on her poor English as she takes the lunch order. Juan cheerfully orders in Spanish to the waitress's relief. An Anglo co-worker jokes, "I'll bet she gives Juan a bigger portion." Everyone laughs, except you. Someone makes a stupid joke like, "It seems every Mexican woman is named Maria. Why don't they give them numbers instead of the same name?" You feel like you should be offended, but it seems Juan is the one being teased, so you ignore the comment. That is just a typical morning. You might deny it, but you know this is the way life is. Don't you wish when people thought of Mexicans, they spoke in admiration? Aren't you tired of tripping over your tongue when you speak Spanish? Aren't you tired of seeing poor, unskilled Mexicans and lazy, unskilled Chicanos? This is the Chicano's burden. And who are the Chicanos anyway? Chicanos are like the stand-up comic's impersonation of the first man to stand on the sun, hopping about from one foot to the other, frantically shifting from Mexican to American, unable to comfortably alight. Chicanos struggle between cultures, and the result is a poor impersonation of either one. We borrow from America and Mexico, and like everything borrowed, it doesn't fit properly. It doesn't cover enough. Pochos can't speak Spanish convincingly, or even fluently, and don't really enjoy tacos de sesos. Chicanos just can't comfortably reconcile their past with America. It probably has to do with our inability to empathize with the role of the oppressor. Gosh, I just don't get this idea of killing Indians, enslaving Africans, murdering Mexicans, and deporting hungry illegals. Maybe it's a genetic thing. Chicanos are a young people, a new entry on the census form. We are frozen in an infantile stage of development because we think to grow up would mean to choose one culture over the other. Instead, we remain like adult children who refuse to move out of our parents' house. But like adolescents, we demand to be taken seriously, then execute a pratfall, like trying to order a Mexican meal in Spanish, get frustrated, embarrassed, and timidly order in English. What was the point? I wrote this book without the usual required reading for Chicano radicals. No Richard Rodriguez, Hunger of Memory, nor Carlos Fuentes, no Octavio Paz. I have not studied La Raza Unida, nor Tijerina's land seizure in New Mexico. I have not studied Cesar Chavez's life, nor the history of the United Farm Workers. I haven't even read Carlos Castaneda's Journey to Ixtlan series. But I have survived growing up Chicano in a time when it would have been easier to assimilate. My grandfather fought in the Mexican Revolution, then came to build the American Railroad. My father was a bracero in the 1950s. My uncle died in World War II, fighting fascism in Europe. My cousin was nearly crippled in Vietnam. I, too, almost lost my life in the swamp of collaboration and self-hate. We are all qualified to our unique opinion. I submit to you mine. You always find someone who thinks they know more than you do, but it is usually only after you have already done something. I hope this book starts a serious, hard-hitting dialogue on the Chicano experience. I know this will not be the last word on this subject, because I know I have more research to do and more to say. I believe every word I have written, but it disturbs me to see it in print. I did not want to acknowledge these things by voicing them. I am Chicano, Mexican, indigenous. I am the good and the bad qualities. Here is my story. Keep the following in mind as you read this book. Life is full of contradictions. There just aren't simple explanations for a world created by men. Remember, people and systems often work against their own best interest. When people think they understand something, they stop listening. Sometimes they silence debate so fiercely they miss something and fall on their face. For that reason, I can't stand intolerance. If you get offended by what you read, sorry, I do not apologize.